and we take seriously the responsibility to preserve it. We are NTD.
Welcome to NTD Newsroom. I'm Fiona G. President Donald Trump says cutting tariffs on China to 80% seems right. The remark comes ahead of crucial trade talks with Beijing tomorrow in Switzerland. As budget work is underway in Congress, President Trump is asking Republicans to raise taxes on millionaires to help avoid cuts to social safety net programs like Medicaid. The Pentagon begins removing transgender service members after the Supreme Court clears the way for President Trump's military ban. Some will be discharged immediately. Others have 30 days to self-identify. Russia is holding its annual Victory Day parade in Moscow today. North Korean military officers are among the socialist representatives attending the festivities. What Russia says about North Korea's involvement in the parade and in the war in Ukraine. The World Falun Dafa Day parade traverses through the heart of Manhattan today. We'll be taking a deeper dive into this peaceful spiritual practice and the persecution that it faces in China. Pope Leo XIV held his first Mass today at the Sistine Chapel. He called cardinals to embrace humility, echoing Pope Francis's example.
This is NTD Newsroom, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
President Trump signals that he could cut China tariffs ahead of the weekend trade talks with Beijing. President Trump said today on Truth Social that 80% tariffs on Chinese goods, quote, seems right. He also added, quote, China should open up its market to USA, would be so good for them. Closed markets don't work anymore. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and Chief Trade Negotiator Jameson Greer will meet Chinese economic czar He Lifeng in Switzerland. The weekend talks in Geneva have been described by administration officials as a step towards de-escalating tensions with China. And meanwhile, at a press conference this afternoon, the White House stressing the president will not lower tariffs on China unilaterally without concessions from Beijing. The administration also reiterates that China needs American consumers, giving the U.S. leverage in upcoming negotiations. Here's what the press secretary said. All right, we're going to move on for now. The White House is adding that 80% was a number that the president threw out there and that the next moves will depend on talks this weekend. Now, the press secretary says the U.S. will work to achieve the best possible deal with China and that Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has the president's full support and confidence in this week's negotiations. Also, China's vice premier met with Swiss President Karen Keller-Sutter in Geneva as well. The Swiss president expressed pride in the two sides choosing to meet in Switzerland. Here's more on what she had to say about the Geneva's trade relationship with Washington.
I have the impression that the U.S. is seeking solutions with individual countries and individual partners that might be tailor-made. So I don't really see a link between what has been announced by the president this morning and the talks we have with the U.S. authorities. Because, of course, you know, the aim of Switzerland is to come back to zero tariffs. Because I just want to remind you that Switzerland doesn't charge any industrial tariffs at all. We are at zero, level zero. So the discussions then should also be different.
Keller-Sutter said Switzerland wanted to be among the next countries to reach an agreement with the U.S. The European nation is looking to cut a deal on the heels of an agreement between Washington and London. President Trump and British Prime Minister Keir Starmer announced a limited bilateral trade agreement yesterday. This agreement leaves in place President Trump's 10% tariffs on British exports. The deal also expands agricultural access for both countries and lowers U.S. duties on British car exports. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said today she would only go to the White House for a solution on trade tariffs. The EU leader was reacting to a question related to President Trump calling her a fantastic person.
I had good conversations with President Trump on the phone and at the funeral of the Pope. But for me it's important that if I go to the White House, I want to have a package we can discuss. So it has to be concrete, and I want to have a solution that we both can agree on. That is the work we're doing right now.
Von der Leyen was speaking at a joint press conference in Brussels with German Chancellor Friedrich Merz. Merz says he congratulated President Trump on reaching a trade agreement with the United Kingdom, but warned that similar deals with individual European nations won't be possible. He emphasized that EU member states have fully delegated trade policy to the European Union, meaning any future deal must be negotiated with Brussels and not individual countries themselves. Merz also raised concerns about rising national debt across the globe, including in the United States, calling the trend troubling. The owner of British Airways has ordered 32 Boeing planes. This comes the day after the UK and the United States announced that trade deal we just mentioned. Britain's international airline group said in an earnings statement that it also ordered 21 Airbus aircraft and that the planes from both manufacturers are due for delivery between 2028 and 2033. U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick said yesterday that a massive deal between a UK airline and Boeing would be announced soon. He declined to say which airline would buy the planes, but said it would be a $10 billion order. Washington and Moscow are reportedly discussing the issue of Russian gas shipments to Europe. Russian gas exports took a hit after the invasion of Ukraine in 2022. Shortly after the war started, the Nord Stream pipelines under the Baltic Sea were blown up, drastically affecting Russian gas shipments. On top of that, gas flows via Ukraine came to a halt earlier this year. That's because Kyiv refused to renew a transit agreement due to the war. But Reuters and Russia's state agency now report that Washington is in talks with Moscow regarding those gas shipments. Russia's state news agency quoted a senior Kremlin official who said Moscow first raised the issue with U.S. counterparts. This comes as the Trump administration is trying to make a deal with Russia and Ukraine to end the war. And President Trump has appointed Judge Jeanine Pirro to serve as interim U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia. The job is one of the most influential prosecutor positions in the country. Here's NTD's Daniel Monahan. Plus, he also has more on the latest events that we're seeing at the White House.
Judge Jeanine Pirro previously hosted the show Justice with Judge Jeanine on Fox News for 10 years. She is currently a co-host of The Five, also on Fox News. Trump wrote on Truth Social that Pirro is incredibly well qualified for the position, calling her one of the top district attorneys in New York history. The U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia is uniquely influential, handling cases ranging from homicide to political corruption to federal fraud violations. The announcement came after Trump withdrew the nomination of the previous pick for the job, acting U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia Ed Martin, due to Senate opposition. Trump later announced that Martin will be moving to the Department of Justice as the director of the Weaponization Working Group and other roles. President Trump and First Lady Melania Trump hosted an early Mother's Day celebration at the White House on Thursday with military mothers and spouses.
Each of the women here today has made extraordinary sacrifices for family and country.
Trump says military moms endure time away from their children, missing birthdays and holidays.
As military moms, you make these sacrifices in your families so that all of our families can be safe and be free.
First Lady Melania Trump said military mothers are on an extraordinary journey.
They're filled with stories of personal sacrifice, determination, loss, and healing.
Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said the military band put on an extraordinary performance for a room full of heroes. Melania Trump also joined members of the Bush family Thursday to unveil a commemorative U.S. postage stamp honoring former First Lady Barbara Bush.
Her message, which emphasized the importance of family and personal integrity, encouraged women to carve their own paths in life.
The stamp, featuring Barbara Bush's 2005 official White House portrait, commemorates the 100th anniversary of her birth. It will be officially released on June 10th. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
Big tax and spending questions are at the forefront of Republicans' new budget goals. President Trump wants to prevent cutting social safety net programs like Medicaid and is reportedly pushing for a higher millionaire tax to get it done. NTD's Melina Weiskup reports.
President Trump aims to make the biggest tax cut for middle and working class Americans and eliminate taxes on tips, overtime, and senior Social Security. Now he's asking Congress to look at raising rates on wealthier Americans. Under consideration is a proposal to raise the individual tax rate on people earning over $2 million per year from 37% to 39%. A White House source told the Epoch Times' Amel Akin that the plan is to help Trump meet his goal to lower taxes on the working class, at the same time protecting Medicaid funds. But the road ahead is sticky, as some Republicans in Congress are opposed to such an increase.
I'd like to not see rates raised on anybody at this point. This is very difficult to be able to do right now across the economy in that sense. So I'd like to be able to maintain rates where they are, but the vast majority have got to be able to get engaged and say, how do we actually resolve this?
House Speaker Mike Johnson previously said he's not a fan of it, but to stay tuned, highlighting the fluidity of the discussions underway. The news comes as lawmakers are having trouble navigating a plan to cut the federal budget and cut taxes without causing a big blow to social safety net programs. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Melina Wisecup, NTD News.
And President Trump today cautioned fellow Republicans in Congress of the political consequences if they raise taxes on the wealthiest Americans. He wrote on Truth Social that Republicans should probably not do it, but he also added that he would be okay if they did do it. DOJ has canceled about 500,000 credit cards used by federal agencies. The department confirmed the move on Wednesday. In a post on X, DOJ said its program to find unused or unneeded credit cards was expanded to 32 agencies and more than 500,000 cards have been deactivated. The post said there's still more work to do. The comment was posted alongside a spreadsheet showing which cards were canceled. It included ones used by the Treasury Department, Interior Department, Education Department, Defense Department, State Department, and many others. The Pentagon will immediately begin moving as many as 1,000 openly transgender service members out of the military. Others will be given 30 days to self-identify. This new directive was issued yesterday. The Supreme Court ruled on Tuesday that the Trump administration could enforce a ban on transgender individuals in the military while other legal challenges proceed. The Defense Department will begin going through medical records to identify others who have not come forward. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said that a false gender identity divergent from an individual's sex cannot satisfy the rigorous standards necessary for military service.
So, in accordance with policy now reinstated, service members who have a current diagnosis or history of or exhibit symptoms consistent with gender dysphoria may elect to separate voluntarily. There's a timeline here, and then eventually involuntarily if necessary. This is the president's agenda. This is what the American people voted for, and we're going to continue to relentlessly pursue it.
Officials have said that as of December last year, there were over 4,200 troops diagnosed with gender dysphoria in the active duty, National Guard, and Reserve. But they acknowledge the number may be higher. There are about a total of 2.1 million troops serving in total. Coming up, we'll be speaking with a panel over what we can expect between the U.S. and Beijing tomorrow after Trump's suggestion of lowering Chinese tariffs. That and more when we come back.
Say goodbye to harsh, bitter coffee and hello to a delicious, smooth brew. With specialty quality beans, expertly roasted in-house, you'll taste the difference with every sip. Fermented with a blend of 50 enzymes, Dave's Coffee delivers a rich brew like no other. Made with the highest grade specialty beans available, you're sure to taste the difference. Elevate your morning with Dave's enzyme fermented coffee.
大提琴不仅仅是一件乐器，它是有生命、有感情的，需要我们精心的照顾。往往我们一个小小的动作，可能都会对人情绪产生微妙的影响。天音的品牌是福星，我们对于传统的理念很荣幸被神韵艺术团选为指定供应商。 时间是酿造音色的不可替代的陪伴。我跟大提琴已经有60多年的友情了，每一把琴都有它自己的个性，熟悉它，才能真正发挥它的潜力。所以，我希望给你的每一把琴，都是首先我所信任的。
Welcome back. Russia is holding its annual Victory Day parade today, celebrating 80 years since the end of World War II. North Korean military officers are among the socialist representatives at the parade in Moscow. And meanwhile, President Trump warns of more sanctions if Russia and Ukraine do not accept an unconditional 30-day ceasefire. NTD's international correspondent Arian Pazdar reports.
Russia is holding its annual Victory Day parade on Friday, celebrating 80 years since the end of World War II. For the first time, Moscow paraded combat drones, which Russia uses to fight Ukraine. And officers from North Korea's military are attending Russia's parade as well. President Vladimir Putin was seen welcoming them, shaking hands and exchanging compliments.
Of course, the president thanked them. It was an act of courtesy and acknowledgement of the heroic achievements of the Korean servicemen in this operation.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un made a rare visit to the Russian embassy in Pyongyang on Friday, celebrating Russia's Victory Day. Meanwhile, in the US, President Trump calls for an unconditional 30-day ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine. Trump says this ceasefire must ultimately build toward a peace agreement. It can all be done very quickly. He went on to add that if the ceasefire is not respected, the US and its partners will impose further sanctions. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says Kiev is ready to implement a 30-day ceasefire immediately. Zelensky added that such a truce would be a real indicator that Russia actually wants to move towards peace. Arian Pazdar, NTD News.
As the leader of the Chinese Communist Party and Russia meet in Moscow, there is a notable authoritarian ally missing from the Victory Parade celebrations, and that is North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. Our Washington correspondent Luis Martinez breaks down how the regime of the Hermit Kingdom has been able to survive.
The United States State Department has designated 4 countries as states sponsors of terrorism. That is Cuba, Syria, Iran, and North Korea. North Korea was added by President Donald Trump back in 2017 after the Obama administration removed it in 2008. Now let's look at the military profile of the Hermit Kingdom of North Korea. Currently, North Korea has 1.3 million military active personnel. They also are a nuclear state, so North Korea has approximately 70 to 90 nuclear warheads with an array of ballistic missiles capable of reaching U.S. territories. And most importantly, North Korea has 2 mutual defense agreements with allied nations which are obligated to defend North Korea if attacked. The North Korean regime of Kim Jong-un has 2 main sponsors. The first of those 2 main sponsors is the Chinese Communist Party, the leader of which, Xi Jinping, has met with Kim Jong-un on 4 occasions, 3 of which it was Xi Jinping who traveled to the Hermit Kingdom. And it's also very important to note that China and North Korea have important trade. 98% of North Korean trade is with China. Without the Chinese Communist Party's economic support, North Korea's military programs would not be possible. The second state that sponsors the North Korean regime is Russia. Currently, there are approximately 13,000 North Korean troops in Russia, in the Kursk region, fighting for the Russian Federation against Ukrainian forces. And it's also estimated that in between 4 and 6 million artillery shells have been sent from the Hermit Kingdom, from North Korea to Russia to fight in the Ukrainian war. In turn, it is believed that Russia has provided North Korea with technology to aid its nuclear, ballistic, and submarine programs. Thanks to the support of the Chinese Communist Party and the Russian Federation, the North Korean regime has been able to conduct assassinations on foreign soil, like in 2017 when the North Korean regime assassinated Kim Jong-un's half-brother in Malaysia. And it's also due to capabilities shared from the Chinese Communist Party and the Russian Federation that the North Korean regime has been able to conduct important cyber attacks, like in 2014, the Sony Picture cyber attack conducted by the Lazarus Group within North Korea. And most importantly are the threats of violence coming from Pyongyang. Since Kim Jong-un rose to power, there have been 129 missile tests. That is 10 times more missile tests than Kim Jong-un's father and grandfather conducted. None of these activities that sponsor terrorism would be possible without the sponsorship of the Chinese Communist Party and the Russian Federation. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
The British government is sanctioning up to 100 oil tankers that are part of Russia's so-called shadow fleet, tankers that are defying penalties and aiding Russia's war efforts. Britain's Prime Minister said the UK will do everything to destroy this fleet. Here's NTD's international correspondent Malcolm Hudson.
British Prime Minister Keir Starmer joined a military summit in Norway, known as the Joint Expeditionary Force. It is a British-led military alliance of 10 northern European nations. Ministers discussed regional challenges, including the war in Ukraine.
So our focus is on Ukraine with our European allies. Of course, today we also announced our biggest ever sanctions package against the Russian shadow fleet. Really important work, again, discussed with our allies this afternoon.
The package of sanctions targeted around 100 oil tankers from Russia's so-called shadow fleet. To defy previous sanctions on Russia, Moscow built up the fleet of tankers whose ownership can be obscured. Britain has accused the operation of bankrolling Russia through the war. They are estimated to have carried more than $24 billion worth of cargo since the start of 2024. The British government said the shadow fleet has damaged critical infrastructure through what is referred to as reckless seafaring, referring to reported damage to an undersea cable in the Baltic Sea. Starmer said the UK will do everything in its power to destroy President Vladimir Putin's shadow fleet. British Foreign Secretary David Lammy called on Putin to accept President Trump's ceasefire deal and begin a process of accountability.
When this war is over, those who have perpetrated it in Russia must account for their crimes of aggression and their crimes against humanity.
Britain's Royal Navy said on Friday it monitored a Russian submarine in the English Channel as part of a NATO mission. They said the submarine, called Krasnodar, entered the channel close to the French coast and was on its way back to Russia from the eastern Mediterranean. Britain's Navy routinely conducts shadowing missions to monitor any potential threats to national security, including to critical infrastructure such as undersea cables or pipelines. Malcolm Hudson, NTD News.
All right, so let's stay on the topic of the Russia-Ukraine war, as well as that comment President Trump made signaling that he could cut Chinese tariffs ahead of the weekend trade talks with Beijing that we're going to be seeing. So now let's bring on a panel. We've got Tony Kinnett, national correspondent for the Daily Signal and host of the Tony Kinnett Cast show, as well as James Gorey, U.S.-China relations analyst and author of The China Crisis. So Tony, James, great to have you both here today. Happy Friday. So Tony, President Trump, what do you make of that remark that he's saying that he could bring tariffs down to 80% on China? It's much lower than 145, but still a lot higher than some of those other tariffs we've seen.
I think the best way to describe this would be, hey, you know, if you ever have been in the middle of punishing a student, or there's some kind of an issue, a student has not turned in work for me when I was a teacher, I would say, hey, look, if you stop the behavior right now, if you decide you're going to be a part of the class, we can go ahead and bring down the punishment just a little bit here. And that's what I'm really seeing from the Trump administration. Of course, Beijing is no longer posting employment statistics. We're seeing some weird economic indicators from China that they're struggling. And I think the Trump administration might be trying to say, hey, look, maybe we'll go a little bit lower here. If you're willing to come to the table and renegotiate this, that might be an opportunity.
All right, James, your initial thoughts?
Yes, Trump knows, and he stated that China's having a really tough time. So China has said, look, we won't come to the table until you lower the tariffs or reduce the tariffs, rather. And Trump's doing a good faith effort. He says, I'll lower the tariffs, and then we'll talk. So he knows that they're under a lot of pressure, but he also knows that from a leverage standpoint, the tariffs are going to hurt China a lot more than they'll hurt the U.S.
And that's something we keep hearing from the administration. At the end of the day, we don't need these cheap Chinese goods, but China needs the American consumer base. Tony, we've heard Treasury Secretary Bessent say that these talks are really going to be about de-escalation between the U.S. and China more than anything. So what do you think we can expect from this first meeting tomorrow?
Well, I think that from the first meeting, I'd say first, this likely isn't the first time that the U.S. and the Chinese governments have actually spoken. I think that when the Trump administration says there have been kind of unofficial communications back and forth, that is in fact true, especially given how the Chinese administration quickly said, no, it's not. We promised that there hasn't been anything. So I think that this will be a more culmination style conversation that will likely lead to some de-escalation on both sides here a little bit. I think that what my counterpart said is right on the nose, though, that China is struggling immensely under the weight of these U.S. tariffs. And it turns out that after the Sino-Soviet split, when the United States single-handedly built the Chinese economy to what it is today, that comes with long-term consequences if China decides that it can go toe-to-toe with the U.S., and we're seeing that right now.
Okay, then, James, do you think Beijing's coming to the table here with some sort of game plan? Is there something that Beijing is hoping to get out of this meeting specifically?
Sure, they're coming with a game plan. Otherwise, there's no reason to meet. But yes, they have several specific things they want to get. But don't be, I think one of them actually is going to be, let's not change too much. And we see that with who Xi Jinping's negotiator will be, is Haley Fang, who's a longtime confidant and friend of Xi Jinping and vice premier, actually. He is not about to transform the way China does business. China is right now in the CCP, particularly, they're in survival mode to a large extent. Banks are freezing capital. People are not getting paychecks. Factories are closing. There's a lot going on that you're not seeing in the mainstream press. So on the one hand, they need to secure some kind of win and look strong. I think rather than a fixer, be a defender and say, look, they're going to try to get something short term, but at the same time, they're not about to do some, this is just the first volley. They're not about to make some huge changes because they can't deregulate their economy without having huge repercussions. They can't even desecuritize their domestic population without rampant protests. So they're in a tight spot.
Tony, on the opposite end, the U.S. going into this, it's going to send Treasury Secretary Bessent and Trade Representative Greer to hold these negotiations. Do you think there's going to be some sort of an element of good cop, bad cop going into this? What do you think the U.S.'s strategy is going to be?
I think that Bessent is going in patiently, as we saw him in the House committees. I think that one thing, if you, again, listen to all of the things that, again, my counterpart listed that China's currently going through, they are desperate for the status quo antebellum. And that gives Bessent all of the cards because he knows China can't outlast this. Again, when the communist regime is no longer posting statistics of any kind, even fudge statistics, I mean, there's got to be something worse than a red alarm. This is like a nuclear level economic alarm for China. All Bessent has to do is sit back and say, that's not good enough. That's not good enough. There's a lot of things the United States wants. Securities for Taiwan. It wants a halt to this rampant IP theft. It wants a lot of the exclusion of certain American aspects out of the Chinese economy. They don't need total reform for the United States to come out of this a winner.
Well, James, do you think there's anything that the U.S. is going to bring to the table here and say, this is a must? If you want any sort of a deal, you have to meet this specific demand. Would there be any sort of demand like that?
I think fentanyl will be right up there. I think, as Tony mentioned, IP theft. IP theft is 600. That's nearly twice the trade deficit. But fentanyl, China's waging warfare by drugs, shipping fentanyl into Mexico and up through the U.S. So those are two big ones. And interestingly, it's a side note, but China is also supporting Russia in its ability to wage war through dual-use technology transfers. 70% of Russia's trade is now with Asia, most of that with China and India. So there's a connection, there's a connectivity there that, Trump wants to make peace in Europe, and China may be a key part of that, but certainly fentanyl, certainly the IP theft, and I wouldn't be surprised if Panama was on the discussion table as well.
Okay, James, this brings me perfectly into the next topic I want to segue into, which is exactly this Russia-Ukraine war. So President Trump, yesterday, he urged Russia and Ukraine to enter into this 30-day unconditional ceasefire while the U.S. continues to lead these peace negotiations. The president and his administration have also expressed a certain degree of frustration, if you will. James, how does China fit into this conversation? Go deeper.
Sure. So, Russia and China, Putin and Xi just had a meeting where they expressed their undying love for one another. That was for an audience, domestic audience, because things are getting tough on China, and their audience is their own people. And the fact is that China is supporting them. They're keeping the Russian economy afloat. Russia's economy is now 7% on defense spending, which is huge. They have full employment because they've lost so many young workers, young men. Inflation is at 20% or is it 9%, but interest rates are at 20%. So there's a lot going on, and China can play a huge role. And I find that the timing interesting that China and Russia have this symmetry right before the trade discussion. They know what the ask will be on that side. So yeah, that'll be a big part of it.
And Tony, what's your take on this very interesting timing?
Oh, well, James is right on the nose. His foreign policy research and expertise is just infallible here. The Russian economy is built on its ability to trade with China. China's economy is built on its ability to trade with the U.S. After World War II, with the exclusion of the Soviet Union, every single economy on the face of the earth was dependent on the U.S. The U.S. rebuilt 1/3 to 1/2 of the entire world trade economy. So that still carries a lot of threads into modern global economics. And not to mention the geopolitical aspects. I think that James is right on the nose. It's likely the Trump administration will tell China, look, if you want some of this economic pain to go away, then you need to stop supplying our geopolitical frustrations. The Trump administration's patience is running very thin. It's running thin in the Middle East. It's running very thin in Europe. And if you think that the Trump administration is going to tolerate Russia getting to trade with those who are trading with us, and we just casually glance that off to the side so that Putin can shoot Chinese bullets instead of Russian manufactured ones, I don't think that's likely to be something that's left unattended for long.
Okay, so Tony, we've seen many attempts already at some sort of a ceasefire in terms of the Russia-Ukraine war, and honestly, they haven't been all that successful. Do you think China is the missing piece here in this negotiation?
I think that China is a missing piece of the negotiation. I think there's this idea the only way, especially from the American left, oh, you have to come at Putin with a strong military force and basically stare him down over the barrel of a rifle. I don't think that's true. Russia has a lot of facets of its economy, of its society that are unstable. And I think the Trump administration is looking for a way to squeeze Putin in the vice. You've heard his discussion, not with Russia, but with Iran also, these secondary tariffs, right? Anyone who trades in this good with this country will experience economic constraints from the United States. And so I think China plays a huge role in that. I wouldn't, perhaps from my limited scope and knowledge here, presume to say it is the key missing piece, but it's certainly central to the conversation.
James, what do you make of that?
I think Tony's right on. It is a missing piece. And there's one other missing piece, and that is this. Recall back in 2018, 2019, when Trump was in Europe telling the Germans, you shouldn't rely on Russian natural gas when we're paying billions to defend you, and now you're sending that money and buying their gas. They're going to put the squeeze on you. Well, they're doing it again now. You've got China meeting with the French, meeting with the Spanish. Oh, we want to have this great relationship. Well, wait a minute. You're doing the same thing again. China is the one who's enabling Russia, or at least supporting it to a large extent, and yet you're trading with China. You can't wait to build a Franco-Sino relationship, in the words of Macron. So there's that same kind of schizophrenic approach. and the linkages are clear, and they're potent, and nothing gets done in a vacuum. And it's time that the Europeans, if they want this war to end, which I'm not so sure they do at some level, then they have to put pressure on China. China has to feel the pressure, and they're not feeling as much as they should from the U.S. in terms of making that public, nor from the Europeans.
Yeah, nothing exists in a vacuum. That's a very good point, James. Tony, how much do you think the minerals deal that was signed with Ukraine has to do with all of this?
It has everything to do with this, because the United States' access to rare earth minerals, it completely cripples one of the key aspects of the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative in order to basically lure and blackmail in a very twisted version of what USAID was originally meant to be during the Cold War, the America's tool to economically stimulate other countries so that we could undermine the Soviet Union. China's using its Belt and Road Initiative to blackmail other countries into working with it like some predatory loan shark for nigh on centuries. And so what the Trump administration's pursuit of really extreme high amounts of energy production, again, as James alluded to, undercutting the Russian oil economy, as well as the Chinese rare earth technology manufacturing and processing economies, giving American infrastructure through AI, through technology refinement production, through long-term communications and infrastructure stability. We see this with the revision of the spectrum divvying up in the Senate currently that Ted Cruz has been talking about. Everything has to do with how the United States develops its tech and industrial sectors over the next 10 years. It is a race to the finish, and there is not a second place here as much as an ultimate winner and an ultimate loser. China's playing a blackmail game, and you got to break the blackmail in order to win it.
And James, last word to you here. I got around 1 minute left. Tony brings up a lot of good points, and I think it points to the central theme that everything is kind of, whether directly or indirectly, leading back to China almost, whether we talk about sanctions or even the trade deal with the UK. In the end, James, what is the U.S.-China relationship going to look like?
If we're successful, China will be a much smaller factor in the world. Manufacturers are fleeing China, percent are considering leaving. Direct foreign investment dropped by 80% in 2023, and so China has peaked. We've seen peak China. Interestingly, in terms of timing, one other thing is China banned Huawei phones were found regarding that terror attack that Pakistan put on India. So there are Chinese shadows, if not fingerprints, in that attack as well. So I think that overall, China is diminishing population-wise, resource-wise. They're an aging population. They're losing their manufacturing base. Their population is demoralized, and that puts the CCP in a very dangerous, cornered position, I think, and we have to be very, very concerned about that.
All right, Tony Kinnett, James Gorey, great having you guys on today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
When we come back, a parade celebrating World Falun Dafa Day hits the streets of Manhattan today. We'll be taking a closer look at what exactly Falun Dafa is and the message its adherents are sharing with the world. Stay with us.
Stay tuned to get a free month of home warranty protection. Tired of searching for contractors when your home appliances and systems break down, only to leave you stuck with a huge repair bill and shoddy repairs? Plumbing, heating, air conditioning, and appliance breakdowns could cost thousands.
Hi, I'm Ty Pennington, here for Choice Home Warranty. They protect my home from expensive repairs, and they could do the same for you. No matter if it's your refrigerator, plumbing, or more than 20 other home systems and appliances, Choice Home Warranty has saved millions of homeowners a whole lot of money. For a low monthly fee, you get their nationwide network of trusted local technicians with plans that cover repairs and replacements done quickly and the right way.
I would recommend anyone who is listening to this to call Choice Home Warranty up. It eliminates the anxiety, frustration, and it saves you money.
Don't let an appliance or home system break the bank, leaving you stressed. Call Choice Home Warranty before that happens and get your first month free. Plus, call in the next 5 minutes and we'll give you free limited roof leak coverage. That's a $70 value, free. Just call now.
No more headaches searching for technicians. No more budget-breaking chaos. Just a peace of mind of having Choice Home Warranty at your service. I trust Choice Home Warranty with my home, and you should too.
Year after year, Choice Home Warranty is recognized as the nation's top home warranty and has thousands of 5-star reviews from real homeowners. Experience real budget protection and call Choice Home Warranty now.
Stop throwing money down the toilet chasing contractors. Call Choice Home Warranty now and save big with their special offer of your first month free and free limited roof coverage. Don't wait another minute. Call now.
Call Choice Home Warranty for your free personalized quote and to get your first month free. Call in the next 5 minutes, and as our special offer, you'll receive free limited roof coverage. That's over $100 in savings. This offer won't last long. Call now to lock in your rate and save big. Call 800-216-9114, 800-216-9114.
Whispered across generations, a hidden secret unveils the essence of longevity and vitality, a timeless legend regarding energy and wonder. Rooted in ancient health wisdom, we proudly introduce Pure Tang Black Ginseng, a 100% natural organic energy drink made from premium 6-year-old Korean ginseng. It takes 2,260 days and nights from seed to growth, undergoing a meticulous 9-step process of steaming and drying. Black ginseng reaches its full potency, enriched with ginsenoside RG3 and enhanced absorption efficiency. No sugar, no caffeine, no artificial ingredients. Experience the pure natural power of Pure Tang Black Ginseng. Nourish your body, strengthen your immunity, and boost your energy. To order Pure Tang Black Ginseng, please visit puretang.com.
Welcome back to Newsroom, celebrating faith, freedom, and the strength of the human spirit. This morning, despite the rain, thousands took to the streets of New York City to commemorate 2025's World Falun Dafa Day. Here's a look at some of the highlights from the Grand Parade.
Principles of Falun Dafa, which is truthfulness, compassion, and tolerance, has acted like a compass in my life. You can say that before I practiced Falun Dafa, I was kind of lost because I just didn't have that compass. And after it, I really found myself, which really helped. Another thing that I would say about Falun Dafa is that Falun Dafa taught me the concept of looking inside myself to improve myself. And this looking inside and measuring myself with the principles of truthfulness, compassion, and tolerance has really helped me to improve as a person. My growth has been exponential. It has been amazing.
The biggest impact it had was it brought back our broken family. I came from a very broken family. We had very bad relationships. I had a lot of resentment towards my parents. We moved out at a very young age, and when we all started to practice, except for my dad, but 2 siblings and my mom, it kind of healed the relationships, and even to a point where now I have my own family, and really taught me to have a good family, a supporting family.
I'm really honored to be here today with hundreds of other Falun Dafa practitioners out here in the rainy weather as well. And we're celebrating 33 years since 1992, since the practice of Falun Dafa began. And I would like to the people watching here and across the world to know that the values of truthfulness, compassion, and forbearance are good. And today in China, this kind of parade is unable to be seen because China suppresses the freedom of belief. And overseas, with the opportunity we're given and that we're able to celebrate joyfully with the rest of the people here, I would like everyone to know the significance and impact of today.
All right, that really was a fun parade. And now joining us in studio, we've got Cynthia Sun, researcher with the Falun Dafa Information Center and fellow with the First Freedom Foundation. She's also a practitioner of Falun Dafa herself, and of course, our Miss NTD 2023. And of course, I just introduced you earlier this morning because we were actually on the show together covering this parade.
Yeah, it was incredible. I feel like so motivated after watching the footage, and I'm ready to run a full marathon now.
You are
yeah.
you? Oh, let's go. Okay. All right, so let's dive deeper in. Now that the parade's over, let's talk a little bit more about what exactly Falun Dafa is and the challenges that it's facing. So first, tell us a little bit more about the work that you do with Falun Dafa Information Center.
Yeah, I'm really honored to be here. And the Falun Dafa Information Center is a human rights center and also a press center for the persecution going on in China. In more recent years, we've also been tracking the transnational repression going on in America and around the world. But our initial goal, our original mission, was to really track the persecution and tell the story of Falun Gong to the world. What's really going on, what the Chinese Communist Party will not tell you. And I think the mission has been very successful. We frequently go to Washington, D.C. to update our lawmakers and the State Department about things going on every single month. And with everything going on, you know, a lot of people don't know, but millions have been detained and harassed in China because Beijing does not want to see Falun Gong being practiced, even in private homes. And last year, unfortunately, we crossed 5,000 documented deaths, a huge toll. And this is only the tip of the iceberg from what we know, because hundreds of thousands potentially could have died, but because of censorship, because it's so difficult to reach information from within the Great Firewall, we just don't know.
Absolutely horrific. But you mentioned you work in DC. Tell us more about what lawmakers have been saying and how they've been reacting to this type of information.
Yeah, so for over 20 years now, we've gotten bipartisan support from both sides of the aisle, from every state in America. This week, on Monday, we actually had a bill called Free Falun Gong, or Falun Gong Protection Act, which was passed unanimously via a voice vote to really free practitioners from the persecution and the horrors that they've been facing inside China. And what the bill really does is target the perpetrators and the influencers at different levels of the Chinese Communist Party from within the state apparatus. And it will sanction people identified as criminals who are really perpetrating persecution against religious believers. So I think this Falun Gong Protection Act is a huge step in the right direction, and now it's just waiting in the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, and it's S-817 is the bill in the Senate. So we're just waiting for that to be scheduled.
And how do you feel about that?
Amazing. Amazing. I was so nervous when the bill was actually being voted on, and you can watch the live stream on the U.S. House of Representatives website. And the live stream, I was just like watching second by second, minute by minute, and just tracking the progress, because there are multiple different bills about China being voted on at the same time. And so I felt like I was gonna have a heart attack right before the voting, because I knew it was gonna pass unanimously, but it just was such a momentous occasion. There are people around the world in over 110 countries like waiting for a bill like this to be passed in the US Congress, and for it to happen after 25 years is just mind-boggling. It's such a positive thing, but also, and I think it should be celebrated, but also like we have much more to go before it actually reaches the president's desk.
And 110 countries, that's the amount of countries that have Falun Dafa practitioners now, right?
Yeah, we have at least 110 countries, and you can visit the website. You can see they're listed by continents, and then by countries, and then by individual states, if there are states like the US. And there are photos as well, so it's really great to see smaller islands like Fiji, There's practitioners there. There's also areas. I saw a video of Afghanistan. There were students practicing Falun Dafa there. And even in Malaysia, which is largely a Muslim country, people practice this spiritual meditation, which is so heartwarming to see.
And the website you're referring to here is
falundafa.org.
Okay, perfect, great.
Yeah.
Talk to us more about how the general public has been reacting, especially, I think, in recent years, we've been seeing more, as you mentioned, their transnational repression by the Chinese Communist Party. Has this brought the issue of this persecution more to the forefront of the general public's mind?
Yeah, I mean, Americans are worried about American issues, and I think we see that across the board. And the past few years, the New York police station was outed, and issues like that have happened every single year. It's just the first time we're hearing about it. And so, you know, with the indictment of Harry Liu and Chen Jinping from the secret police station, we found out that those individuals had set up an office in February 2022 to continue and to increase transnational oppression against diaspora here in America, which is why it is so dangerous and it is so terrifying to imagine that even in America, American citizens who have faith and who believe in a creator are able to be targeted by Beijing in this manner. And even last August, my organization, we were sent a death threat, and it was a photo of a gun barrel. And the email was, "You will meet God."
My gosh.
Which is also kind of ironic because the Chinese Communist Party doesn't believe in God.
Irony seems to be a big theme when it comes to the Chinese Communist Party. But when we watched today's parade, I think what really touched me was seeing those little kids with their parents, you know, holding their parents' hands. They only come up to like this high, but they're walking through the rain. They're happy to be there. Their parents are happy that their kids are helping in spreading such an important message. And I think what's so heartbreaking in terms of this persecution that we're talking about here is that these types of families, they don't get to do that in China, and they're ripped apart in China.
Yeah, it really is such a privilege that we have here, the First Amendment, and the fact that it's actually protected, unlike in China where, you know, religious freedom is not protected, even though it's written in the Constitution. So I think it is incredibly a privilege to have this parade here. It's a long-awaited parade, once in a year. And for these kids who are growing up in America, it's a chance for them to really see what the impact is on the world that Falun Dafa has had, and to see the people passing by, waving at them, handing them lotus flowers, I think is an incredible opportunity for them to also see what it might be in the future where China doesn't have communism. And, you know, all of these events, celebrations throughout the year really emphasize the fact that you're right, in China, they don't have this opportunity. They can only watch us through VPNs or secretly print photos in their homes, or, you know, access the web through other means. And it's really such a pity that in a place that has a history of rich traditions of Buddhism, of Taoism, of divinity, that a parade like this is inconceivable. It's just incredibly sad. And I think it also speaks to the human toll and the real people that have suffered. You know, these aren't just statistics. We've talked about tens of millions of people who still practice in China by some estimates. These are real people. Each one of these million are real people with families, with neighbors, with coworkers. And the fact that just meditating like this isn't allowed anymore is just unbelievable.
Yeah, and I think there's a reason the First Amendment is the First Amendment, because those really are unalienable human rights. But Cynthia, I remember we were talking right before the parade coverage started. You yourself, you're pretty much raised in Texas. You call yourself a Texan, so you're really an American. But of course, you still have this Chinese-American background. So for you, and doing all this work that you do, when you see all these aspects of traditional Chinese culture on the streets of New York City, how does that make you feel?
I'm so incredibly proud. I was always, like, my childhood was always revolved around these two separate identities. When I go to school, I'm American, but when I go home, my grandparents can only conversate in Chinese. And so I always felt very separated from my peers, and I didn't really have that heritage to connect to. But in terms of going to the events, being able to see the dragon dances, the lion dances in person, being able to participate in some of the dances and the drumming, the marching band is just incredibly fulfilling. And I feel like it kind of fills that void of like heritage, because I can still celebrate here in America, even though I'm thousands of miles away from China.
Well, I think that's a sentiment that a lot of Chinese American children could really relate to.
Yeah. And I wanted to ask you before we end.
Yes?
What was your most favorite part?
Oh, look at
the
that.
parade?
The tables have turned. I'm getting asked the questions now. Well, I gotta say, I have covered quite a few of these parades. I have watched them a lot as well. Tianguo Marching Band is always my favorite. I think this is the reason why they lead the parade. Yeah. Especially when you're there in person. Like I think it was you who mentioned, right, the drum beat. It feels like it's like pounding with your heart. Your heart feels like it's pounding with the drums. And the music itself, it was absolutely amazing. If any of our audience out there is curious, I definitely recommend going to one of these parades in person, because the Tianguo Marching Band, it's just amazing.
Yeah, and the fact that they have the whole marching band, not just the drums, but also the brass, the wind instruments.
And all the original songs as well.
It was incredible to hear, even from the studio. And even in the rain, you could hear the sound was so full. I think my favorite part was definitely the passerbys, the reactions of people. There was a handicapped fellow that was joining in with the lion dance, and he was just dancing there in front, and I was just loving the energy. I think it's such a special time to see this rainbow party of a parade marching down 42nd Street in the pouring rain. It was just so motivational.
And I think that just goes to show the power of positivity in this world. All right, Cynthia Sun, it was great having you today. We got to get you on more often. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
All right, and when we come back, disruptions at Newark International Airport continue. A telecommunications outage grinds traffic to a halt. We'll have that and more when we come back. Stay with us.
Hey, have you heard what's happening at Mathis Home? The Monumental Savings event is happening right now. Save big on our newest arrivals. We have hundreds of sofas with styles you love at unbeatable prices. Like this one. At just $5.99, you can enjoy this contemporary sofa by Ashley, complete with 5 accent pillows. Just one of over 100 great sofas in stock and ready for you to enjoy tonight with fast and free delivery. So don't miss out on the Monumental Savings event happening at your furniture superstore, Mathis Home.
What if you could whiten your teeth by simply brushing your teeth? Now you can with Smile Actives, the teeth whitening breakthrough that safely gets your teeth white and keeps them white every day, just by brushing your teeth.
I never thought that whitening my teeth could be so easy. I just put the gel on the brush, the toothpaste on it, brush, and I can see my white teeth.
Simply add Smile Actives to any toothpaste, and our patented PolyClean technology activates into a powerful microfoam that penetrates into the enamel surface to safely lift and remove stains.
You need a simple way to whiten your teeth, without strips, without trays, without going to the dentist. And it was about time that a product was developed that you would be able to do that with just brushing.
And now Smile Actives is even better with new Pro Whitening Gel with 33% greater whitening power, clinically shown to whiten teeth faster, up to 8 shades. 100% of users saw whiter teeth. On food stains, coffee and wine stains, even on veneers, crowns, and dentures.
I eat the blueberries, I drink the coffee, and I know that Smile Actives will keep my teeth white every day.
If you could use something so easy like Smile Actives to take yellow teeth to white teeth, why wouldn't you?
Why spend hundreds of dollars for whitening treatments at the dentist when now you can whiten your teeth with new Smile Actives Pro Whitening Gel every time you brush your teeth? Call or go to smileactives.com and for a limited time get new Pro Whitening Gel for just $24.95. Order in the next 5 minutes and buy one, get one absolutely free for just $24.95. That's 2 for 1 and save 58%. We'll even include free shipping. Get your teeth whiter guaranteed or return it within 60 days for your money back.
I smile every day now.
the difference is literally night and day.
So now I'm always smiling, always choosing, because now my teeth are much whiter.
This offer is not available in stores, so call or click now before the special buy one get one free offer goes away.